Good afternoon, everyone. I will call the Monday, March 6, 2023 Design Review Committee meeting to order at 3 p.m. For the record, both appointed members are present, as is the planning official, Jenah Thornborrow, and planners, Hanna, Veal, and Betty Gum. Are there any changes to the agenda?
Not I.
Thank you. And there's none by staff. And that will lead us to the consent agenda.
I don't have any.
I don't have anything either. I'll move to approve the consent agenda.
All in favor?
Aye.
All right, the first action item today is a continuation of design review fiscal year 2022, number 22. And Katrina Colm with Erstad Architects is requesting new construction of a multifamily project located at 233 and 311 East 47th Street. With that, I'll turn it over to you, Ms. Colm.
All right, I'm assuming you guys can see my screen online.
Yes.
Yes.
Excellent. Katrina Colm, Erstad Architects, 310 North 5th Street in Boise, Idaho. We're back in front of you again for the 47th Street apartments. We have been able to update our site plan, working diligently with the irrigation district and our civil engineer. We were essentially able to mirror the locations of the plantings along the property line and the irrigation line that we are now tiling. As Hanna noted in the staff report, with the drainage ditch being tiled on either end, we now meet city code in order to be able to tile the length of it. And again, working as a team, I think we've come to a solution that gives us the separation needed between the line and the trees, but also allows those plantings along the property edge. I do want to note, and this came up in the last meeting, that irrigation line can't go in any other location. It's serving properties to the east. And you can see those connection points here and here that I've highlighted in red. And so in order to maintain that service, this is really the only location on our property that it can go. Another point that I want to bring up while looking at the site plan is we were able to get 2 trash enclosures in place, essentially splitting the location of those across the property. In addition, I know there was some concern about this area down here, mirroring the buildings on this end of the property. We were able to get those fire riser rooms along the property edge, opening up this node or this plaza space down between the 2 adjacent buildings. In addition, all of our pedestrian crossings will be concrete, so it'd be quite a stark contrast between basically the black asphalt and the white concrete, which you will see in some of the renderings that we have coming up. Again, this is that west property edge. We did open up 47th, which you'll see in this next one. Again, removing that front fence along 47th and our main courtyard really allows you to see completely through the property. This is the irrigation property line, again, showing those trees essentially locating on the property line. In addition, you can't really see the irrigation, but it's just along the edge of that sidewalk that you are seeing there. And then we've got some really good shots, again, showing that rear courtyard space, which we're very pleased with how that came out. So this is that property line. Again, in this image, you can see that pedestrian walkway being changed in material to really identify it as very pedestrian. Stepping back just a little bit further so you can see that in full view. Looking back the other way, again, we've got the two amenity areas on either side of this, and then kind of again showing that complete sight line all the way through the property by removing that fence along 47th. A little closer view there for you. We also worked diligently on the amenity areas, really trying to make sure that they're going to be easily identifiable. You can also see the trash enclosure edge on this one. So we're changing the style of siding in addition to the color of siding, again, working with signage. This is also a good shot for you to see sort of that change in material that will allow that pedestrian view. This is that other building that has the similar amenities with it. And I believe that is the end of this presentation. I will note we do have an alternate up along 47th if we need. This view. If there's still concern about, how this is meeting street edge, I do have an alternate that I can show, but we like how that landscape is meeting that sidewalk edge, and we like the openness that's been created by removing that fence. So we're proposing it as we view it. But I'm happy to answer any questions based on the changes we presented today.
So
Thank
can
you.
you elaborate just on that alternate? I mean, is that something that?
We can pull that sort of landscape strip that you see back and provide some additional hardscape. And we've talked about what does that hardscape want to become? Is it a public facing amenity? Is it amenity that works better with the site? I know in some of the comments there were notions of, e-bike parking and e-scooter parking to go with the general parking, guest parking areas that we've talked about. So it's an option. Again, I don't think it's our favorite just based off design. We like what that landscape is doing for that courtyard, but did want to let you guys know we had thought about it and processed through it as an option.
Thank you.
All right, any other questions for the applicant? All right, seeing none, I'll turn it over to Ms. Veal for a staff report.
Good afternoon. This is design review fiscal year 2022-0022. The applicant did a very good job at summarizing the changes that they have proposed. Some particular ones that I would like to reiterate or include is that the applicant did manage to have additional trash enclosures added to both sides of the property. And it looks like there are two trash enclosures on each side. But with adding those trash enclosures, they did have to eliminate one of the vehicle guest parking spaces. So instead of asking for an alternative to parking standards to allow for a deficiency of 8 parking spaces, it is now a deficiency of 9 parking spaces. The applicant also submitted a letter from the irrigation ditch Fairview Acres company saying that the company would rather have the irrigation ditch tiled in along the perimeter of the property boundary lines. And that was included in the submittal packet for the record. And additionally, the pedestrian pathway that was discussed at the previous hearing that goes from the common lot through the property and all the way to the back side of the property. That pedestrian pathway over the common drive has been identified as a different hardscape material and pattern via the site plans. And if there are any other questions regarding the changes, I can most likely answer those questions, if not the applicant. But I'll move on to the decision document. I have highlighted on page 11 some of the conditions that staff has proposed in the approval. That includes allowing for the irrigation ditch to be tiled based off of Garden City Code, allowing for it to be tiled based off of the two adjacent properties having the irrigation canal be tiled. And that's in accordance with Garden City Code 84A9. I've also conditioned that the deficiency of 9 vehicle parking spaces is permitted so long as the rideshare parking spaces, e-bike parking facilities, and scooter parking facilities are provided as proposed in their submittal documents and their site plans. I've also conditioned that the northern property boundary line that is associated with the gravity irrigation ditch does not need to have the trees per the perimeter landscaping requirements, but it does need to have a mix of evergreen and deciduous screening vegetation. And then condition item 7 is also highlighted, and that's just in regard to the common open space being adjacent to the adjacent property, which was previously approved at the last design review hearing, and its design review fiscal year 2022-0023. And there needs to be an easement ensuring that this common open space cannot be constructed upon. That includes fencing so that those two common open spaces between the adjacent properties remain open and like a common open space for both properties. And with that, I'll stand for any questions.
Thank you. Any questions for Ms. Veal?
Did you have an intention or maybe an idea of how wide that easement would be? Is that maybe something that's defined in the condition as wide as the common area itself or something like that, just so it doesn't end up just being a 4-foot gate or something like that?
Right. That is not drafted in the decision document, but we can certainly require that it is as wide as what the common open space is proposed as currently.
Okay.
I don't have any questions.
All right, thank you. With that, we'll open the public testimony. And the first person that we have signed up today is Tom Shapatcher. Thanks.
Thanks for letting me testify again or to talk as public testimonial. I spoke last time for this about the project. Our main issue was the trash enclosure, and so appreciate that you guys addressed that. Of course, we cared so much about that. We paid attention the whole time to the meeting, and both of the committee members had said, you know, can you analyze putting it centrally? And that's really our biggest thrust. Is it's good that you've split it, because in a way you look at rather than 60 units dumping their trash right by our property line, it's 30. But I think even if it were just a 30-unit development and the trash enclosure was where it is, I think we'd have an issue with it. I think I mentioned that we own these properties, and the two properties that are right there are two different parcels. The houses are oriented, one facing west or north, one facing south, or they're basically facing to where you'd be sitting on your front porch, and the trash enclosures to your right or to your left. And they're at the back side of the property. So it's about 40 feet away. So the main concern I had is, I think the commission or the design committee members had said, can you guys evaluate it centrally? I think the project should absorb the impact of the garbage. I just think that it's good. It's a better move, and it's a better move that you have more perimeter landscaping than you did before by the tiling of how you moved the ditch a little bit. But still, to me, it's a really big issue to have the trash enclosure right there. I think that, and I guess the other comment is about parking. And I know that we've been giving variances out in Garden City for it. I really don't think that giving 9 parking spaces up is a wise move, because Adams Street has no parking. So parcels on, like our parcels on Adams, don't have any street parking. So what you're told is you can have guests park on 46th or 47th. And if this property behind is given essentially is giving a variance of 9 parking spaces that may inevitably be parking on 47th Street. I think it just absorbs all of that street parking, when I think Adams Street owners should have some, reasonable probability of getting a parking space on the street if they need to, since they don't have any street parking. I don't know if this is, PR is PR, but on March Capital's website, you guys have this property is having 148 parking spaces. Maybe that's because it's the code and you had that there and we're going to ask for the variance, but I just don't know if it's financially feasible already at 148. It's just the highest and best thing to lobby for, not lobby for, but to apply for, is to get it down to 141. But I think it should be 148. My biggest issue is the trash enclosure. And I just think we went around again and looked at more big apartment complex projects around town. And most of them, hardly any of them have it all central to the thing. And if they're not central, there's someplace else that isn't right at the property line with the neighbors. They have an enclosed structure with a roof. Just a lot of things, obviously, you guys know, that can be done to mitigate it. So that's our big issue. 2 properties that we have right there on the north side of the property, and important enough to us that, maybe I should have reached out to the applicant to talk about this before, but some of this important enough to us that I think I'd have to try to appeal decisions. I just really got to ask for a condition to I haven't heard an analysis about putting it centrally. So just can't emphasize enough how important it is to us, because I think it's a long-term impact on the properties that we have, and quiet enjoyment of the just sitting in your backyard. I think anybody here, if they had this kind of proposal and had the garbage that close to their house and where they sit in their backyard, they would take issue to it. Just a big property. And I'll just say, we love what Garden City's got going on. Like I mentioned, we bought these properties for employees for our business, which is also in Garden City, to be able to ride their bikes to work, to enjoy everything that's going on in Garden City. So this project in a lot of ways is great. It's going to enhance this area. So I'm not against everything and anything. It's just the specific impact to us. So. Thanks.
Great, thank you. Any questions? All right, thank you. Seeing none, we'll move to David Bedford.
Hello, my name is David. I spoke at the last hearing about the garbage enclosures. I'm here again for the same reason. 2 enclosures, 1 on each side. It still leaves my neighbor and I living next to the dumpster and recycling. Not only that, but now someone on the other side of the property who will also be living next to one of these enclosures. Like many people, I've lived in a couple of apartments in my life. I've also had some cleaning and landscaping project or contracts with locations similar to this. And in my experience, a dumpster or an enclosure for 30 units, more or less, is sometimes overflowing and has trash stacked up on the side. This enclosure is going to be about 25 to 20 yards away from my front door, and it'll be even closer to my neighbor just across from me. I can't think of, or I don't think of anybody that would want to live right next to that. If it was centrally located, it would be fair to ask why a potential tenant would want to take one of these units near the enclosure. I think that's a reasonable concern that they might have, but they'll get to choose whether or not they want to live there. My only choice as a current resident is to request that it be relocated before it's been built. I can't quote anybody on this, but I believe it was said at the last hearing that while they do fall short of the requirement for the guest parking, they've provided more parking compared to other developments that have been approved. And with potential changes to the parking code that might be coming our way, as far as being more lenient, if it was possible to move some of these spaces or even eliminate a couple spaces, it would just be really nice to have this in a central location rather than up on the property line with other people. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anybody online who wishes to testify? If so, please utilize the raise your hand feature. All right, we're not seeing any, so if we're missing you, just speak up, please. Right, hearing none, I'll turn it back over to the applicant for a rebuttal.
Okay, so I want to make it clear on the trash enclosure that we're 15 feet off the property line. In addition, you'll have the property line fence that occurs along with the actual trash enclosure itself. In addition to all of the, landscaping that we've really worked hard to obtain on either side. As to the centralized location, we really prioritize this central courtyard space for the development and the amenity that provides for all of the potential tenants. So we did look at centralizing it in addition to the requirements that the trash service has for backup. You need the full clear 50-60 feet in front of that enclosure to accommodate that trash truck. So we were kind of limited with where it went, but I think the biggest point here is we've pulled it off the property line as far as we can. We're landscaping around it. It's kind of a double fence scenario. So we don't feel it's going to be hopefully too big of a nuisance for the adjacent neighbors. I think parking has been addressed. We've done the best we can. Again, knowing things are changing at the city level, but also providing, garages for each of the units that meet city code. So all we're really talking about here is guest. And we did want to note that condition 4 is no longer required in your decision document.
A quick clarification, you're proposing 10 feet off the property line, correct? Not 15?
Is it 10?
Is it?
So we're still working with the trash company to try to size that enclosure because we've added 2. And so we're really hoping that we can reduce it. They've been unresponsive, but it'll be somewhere between 10 and 15 feet off that property line.
Okay, I think I'm just looking at one of the architectural site plan here that indicates that it's 10 feet off. This is kind of what it's showing. So somewhere in between there, but at least 10 feet.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
And I do have a question. If you know as to how parking will be managed, will every tenant automatically be assigned a parking space? Or is there an unbundling of parking?
So all the parking for tenants will be 2-car garages. So their parking will be in the garages, and then the intent is for the guest parking to be guest parking.
Thank you. And they'll automatically be assigned those garages with their unit?
Yep, they're accessed directly into their unit so you don't want anyone else in there.
Thank you.
And I also wanted to note that the goal is to have the trash enclosures half the size, but like Katrina said, the trash company has been slow to respond. So what we proposed to them is half the size of what it originally was. And that's why it may be up to 15 feet from the property line.
Thank you. Are there any other questions of the applicant?
Just a quick thing that looked different, and it may not be, but the courtyard space between the buildings down at the end of this site, did that get smaller when the risers flipped to the perimeter? It looked like it got a little narrower.
It's a little narrower, but it's actually bigger square footage because again, those risers.
Oh, because the risers were
down.
in it.
Yeah,
Yep.
the risers were in it. Yep.
I follow you.
I don't have any questions.
No more questions.
All right, thank you. Then we'll close the public hearing and turn it over to the committee members.
I just had a couple of comments to start off. One was back to street facing view, the entries that we've talked about on 47th Street. My final comment on that would be, and I don't know if Katrina's still at the mouse and can scroll to those, but there's kind of like a fence barrier that hides those entryways. And I would just suggest that that gets removed so that they look like entries. It's kind of like trying to conceal it as an entry, and that's the opposite effect I think that the code is looking for. We want it to look like an entry and have that street front presence. So just to eliminate those little fence like wing walls would be a comment that I have. And then the other, if you scroll to the end of the common area where it meets the parking and the drive, I have a couple of comments on that. One is a suggestion that between the end of this large common area and the parking, maybe there's something you can do to soften that edge. So, and not to impede the pathway connection to the smaller courtyard in the back, but maybe there's something to soften between the, you know, what will be the face of the guest parking and that edge. And that's a recommendation. And then a suggestion that I would put into a condition is that pathway across the asphalt be, it can be concrete, but we want it to be a textured concrete or something that is more than just, you know, a broom finish concrete that looks as much like a driveway as anything else. So something that indicates that if it is to be concrete, something that indicates that as something special, stamped, textured, colored, or it's pavers of some sort, but something other than just asphalt and regular concrete. And those are my big comments. I hear the trash enclosure concern from the neighbors, but I also see the reality and impact of Republic Services requiring the backup space that they have and the turnarounds that they need, and maybe more so because it will be a frequent service depending on the use. So I think that, the landscape barriers and the distance and it being in a masonry trash enclosure in addition to fence at the property line, I think it's gonna meet the intents of the code for that perimeter.
Yeah, I guess I would concur with those comments. I too feel that the trash enclosure and its distance from the property line and the buffer and the double fencing. I mean, oftentimes it in a lot of developments such as this, or even in other more commercial related developments, I mean, the trash enclosure is and is allowed to get a little bit closer to the property line, and a lot of times ends up there. So I think it's just important to note that that the effort with the landscaping and the fact that we've got a little bit more distance than you would even typically see, it really helps to mitigate that. And I think that splitting those into the two trash enclosures is going to alleviate the intensity on either side if there was just one. So I appreciate the move to being able to incorporate that and split that up into one on each side for the convenience of the users and just for the intensity. The one that I just is still a little bit focused on here is just really what that the end of that plaza space and how it meets 47th Street. It's definitely moving in the right direction, elimination of the fence. I just feel that maybe something that gives it more of a defined sense of place or feeling of arrival or something like that. I would suggest looking into, continuing to investigate just on how that presents itself at the street. But other than that, I really think that the modifications that are made since the last time we saw it have really addressed the items that I felt that were big concerns. So, yeah, I think it's really it's greatly improved the improvements that have been made. And if there's a possibility too on that courtyard in the back, depending on what happens with the trash enclosure, if there's a possibility to open those buildings, those two buildings up a little bit, getting the fire riser rooms even a little bit closer to the sidewalk over there. I know they're kind of pulled back, or we may be at the distance of setback distance there with those. I'm not sure what it is, but if there was an opportunity to get a little more width in that back courtyard space, that would be great, just because that's the main connection to all those residents on that backside. I mean, that's their front door. So whatever that can be done there, that I think would only enhance that space, but definitely moving the riser rooms out of there and opening that up has done a lot.
Thank you. What I believe I'm hearing should the committee move forward for potential conditions is to address the existing draft condition number 7 to require that the easement be as wide as the common open space. Amend the existing draft condition number 4 to no longer exclude the perimeter landscaping, but to still require a mix of evergreen and deciduous. To remove the fence at the entryways, to soften the edge between the parking and the pedestrian zone, that the pathway be textured beyond a broom finish across the parking area. That the plaza at 47th Street better address the street, and allowance that the courtyard, that the buildings open onto the courtyard at the rear of the property if possible.
Yeah, I think you got them all. And I'm comfortable making a motion to approve with those conditions.
I will second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you, everybody, for your time.
Thank you.
All right, the second item on the agenda and the last item on the formal committee agenda today is a discussion for a subdivision fiscal year 22, number 8 Chandler's Place. And the discussion is specific to condition number 18, prior to approval of construction plans, whether or not the elevations are meeting the intent of that condition. And with that, I'll turn it over to the applicant.
Hi there. My name is Jennifer Moore, partner with GHM Architects, 1606 West Hayes Street, Boise. And I have a couple of quick presentations if I can share my screen. It looks like I can. So just let me know if you can't see any of these. All right, are we good?
Yep, that came up.
Perfect. So, okay. So just a really quick refresher of the project itself. Obviously, we're just talking about the color elevations, but I feel like having a little bit of context might help since there's a lot going on in Garden City. So we've been through DRC back in December. So this is Chandler's Place. I think I might be able to get rid of our, there we go. Chandler's Place Townhomes. Our project team is SRG Holdings Farmley Development is our developer and owner. We have Kimley Horn and then GHM Architects as well. We met with DRC back in December and had a great discussion. We had just a couple of conditions placed. There was additional glazing requested on both the garage doors and side lower elevations of the garage areas. Both of which we did add. Obviously backing up to the site. So we're looking at the corner of 52nd and Allworth, not terribly far from the expo. We're on a Main Street corridor and the mixed use residential future land use map, zoned R3. Here's just a really closer view of the site with your single family and a little bit of commercial around it. You know, we've provided and planning DRC, planning and zoning and city council all agreed, you know, variety of housing types and offerings have been met. Parking was one discussion item. We resolved those as well. Open space. We've updated our landscape plan since you have last seen it as well. And then this is just, you know, the variety of housing types, all that good stuff. Floor plan variation, building height, number of floors. And then now I'm actually going to move into our regular presentation. So for this discussion item itself, you know, we received the comment that structures shall have a variety of siding, materials, and color schemes to better meet the intent of the PUD code. And so since our DRC hearing back in December, we've really taken that to heart and tried to figure out, you know, what the intent of that comment is. You know, obviously one really big factor in this particular development is to create something kind of architecturally focused. And with that, some amount of attention to detail was kind of the direction that we decided to take it. And so obviously backing up to this, how we got here, you know, these are some of the precedents that we looked at. You can see a variety of really just details in these precedents, you know, how the windows are treated in particular. You know, there's not a lot of, you know, there's somewhat of continuity in those materials, but it's the details really that are what we're looking at here. And so the first kind of approach that we took was to use the site massing and really encourage a cohesive development. And that was taken from the the Garden City Code, just to make a development that really feels like its own little micro neighborhood. So you kind of have a feel for this neighborhood, and I think that will help create something special for the residents. From there, we kind of honed in on the elevations themselves. By analyzing these details and by analyzing these elevations, we were able to add kind of a wide variety of different detailing really around the windows. And we focused a lot on the windows because those are kind of, in our minds, those are really pedestrian elements. Those are the things that, you know, you're looking into, you're looking out of. They're really kind of pedestrian elements. And so using that is where we're focusing our attention on those details. We felt really started to meet the intent of the comment, because not only are you getting a variety of kind of detailing, you're getting a variety of modulation, you're getting a variety of kind of that in and out, especially when along that pedestrian environment as well. And that's kind of where I think there's a little bit of a bonus happening, because this detailing is where that variety is happening. You know, as you're walking along, for example, 52nd Street, you know, this window goes in and then these are more flat. So you kind of get this modulation, you get kind of a flow that you might not necessarily have if just the color was different. And you can kind of see that happening all over, and each color is just a different sort of detail happening. And so this is our street elevations for these projects. You can kind of see where some of those shadow lines are happening in here. Another big thing that we added, which wasn't there before, but we're trying to kind of graphically show it a little bit better, is that kind of primary field material. And so because it's a tall wall, one of the big things that we wanted to really prevent was a feeling of something stark or blank or just a really big solid wall. And so selecting a material with variety, with a little bit of randomized kind of pattern to it, we feel really helps to alleviate that, but also it does add that variety. And I think it starts to meet the intent as well. And so this is kind of, here's some images of what that material actually looks like. And so really what it's doing is it's adding movement, it's adding relief, it's adding some maybe even perceived shadow lines to what would be a flat field. And so I think because we have variation in that primary field material, having a color, that teal color, which would be this vertical accent color, be the same kind of consistent throughout. It does reinforce that kind of consistent development pattern, the cohesive development, and helps to kind of reinforce the micro neighborhood feel while still providing relief, still kind of reinforcing kind of Garden City's sort of really unique patchwork fabric of development feel that's really started to happen in Garden City. I think is really special. So that's kind of what we're proposing as the intent. We feel that we've kind of exceeded what we interpret as the intent behind that, and are open to any questions.
Thank you. Any questions for Ms. Moore?
Yeah, I do have a question. So we're looking at a palette of two materials there. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Are they oriented differently in some cases, or is it just uniformly oriented the way you've just presented them there?
Correct. So it is uniformly oriented the same, and that's just to, again, keep that cohesive development and then use the windows and those trims and details as the variety.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I don't have any specific questions. This is just kind of discussion item, no formal staff report on it or anything?
Yeah,
That
that
is-
is correct. There
Okay.
is no formal staff report. It is just to satisfy the condition in the decision document, that number 18 under prior to approval of
And that's
construction.
the additional fenestrations one?
That's what I saw it was, but maybe that's not what we're talking about.
Yes, it would be the additional fenestration.
Okay.
Side
And-
elevation.
And that, I don't think you mentioned it, Jennifer, but it did look like that there was an additional window on that Allworth side in the living area behind, what would be kind of behind the garage. Is that right? There's the garage and then the bedroom. Yeah,
Oh, so there is a small, so this would be the living area window right here. We did place because the garage is a fair amount of that lower
Yeah.
elevation. We did place a window in the garage on that Allworth space for those two
Yep.
units.
yep,
So that would be
great.
these two right here.
And then in our discussion last time too, it was kind of this question of, is it street facing? Is it a side yard? That sort of thing, because it is set back so far from Allworth. So I think the additional effort that was made to include more fenestration satisfies any concern that I might have, and I'll let Brett comment on that as well, because I think that's the item in question.
Yeah, I think that is what we talked about, just that lower half of the building being still kind of perceived as having a connection to the street, even though it is set back and there's that additional right-of-way space or what have you in between. I think that the added fenestration, it is what we were looking for, or what I was looking for in the comment.
So there you have it.
And I think one of the other questions that we had and our understanding for this particular discussion was make sure I can get it. I just pressed a lot of stuff and I'm sorry about that. There was a actual condition kind of talking about a variety of siding materials and color schemes to better meet the intent of the PUD code. I think that was maybe a subset of condition number 18 that I'm not
Let me see.
seeing.
Yeah, it's number 20. And I think you've described what you've described has I think satisfied that in my mind. And also, you know, the architecture you've presented does have that variety. And as you were explaining, it has kind of the solid and void and the different conditions of each different window unit and each different door unit. So I think that's, you know, I'm content with that, because to me, the architecture speaks to the variety as much as the materials are. And I think just adding more materials to some of these forms doesn't necessarily make it better.
I'll just add a comment to that, that's why I had the question on the orientation is, I think subtle changes like that can have a pretty big impact on that, whether it's changing a material, not necessarily doesn't need to do that. Could it be as subtle as running the metal panel horizontally versus vertically, and kind of playing with some of that. I guess I would encourage you to think about that. I wouldn't say that this doesn't meet kind of what we intended with providing that as you described with the different detail. And I mean, all of that is important too. And it all, as the overall composition, you know, speaks to that. It benefits from all of those things. I would just, again, encourage the thought of, you know, does this have a place in there too? You know, at the accent, the entryways or something. I mean, just whatever. Just That's kind of what I was, in my thoughts with that initial comment were on those kind of lines. Doesn't have to be drastic.
Absolutely. Yeah, I totally agree with that and appreciate the comment for sure. Something that we'll keep exploring as we go down the road. If there's opportunities to add something like that, we'll certainly keep that in mind.
So Jenna, are we looking for some kind of any kind of like emotion, or is this just, if it looks good, staff can deal with it from there? What are you looking for?
Emotion never hurts, but in that it's discussion, I don't know that it has to be formal. If we're hearing both committee members saying that it's good enough to move forward.
Yep.
Okay.
Yes.
All right.
Thanks, Jennifer.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. And with that, that concludes the regularly scheduled design review committee meeting at 3:50. We do have a consultation directly following.